Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever actually sat down and stared at a flight data exceedance manual, you already know it can look like just an endless, intimidating wall of numbers and warnings. Well, today we're going to fix that. We're taking that dense Bombardier Key 400 flight safety manual and turning it into a clear, strictly sequenced flight path. We're basically going to build a mental map of these safety limits together, tracking a flight from the literal second we walk into the briefing room all the way to the moment we retract the landing gear and climb up into the sky. Okay, let's just dive right into our agenda. Think of this as our literal flight plan for today. We'll start with item 1, the pre-flight briefing. Then item 2, engine start and taxi. After that, item 3, rolling down the runway, and we'll wrap up with item 4, wheels up. All right, section 1, pre-flight briefing, amber and red exceedances. So before we even think about starting those engines, we really need to understand what actually happens back in the safety office when a flight data limit gets busted. To memorize this effortlessly, I want you to use the AR memory trick. A is for amber, and amber means advice and self-analysis. R is for red, and red requires a review and formal corrective action. Simple, right? So an amber band exceedance is medium severity. Hit one of those, and you're getting an email. It's essentially an advisory notice for your own self-analysis. Now, if it keeps happening, sure, the flight data analysis cell might pull you in for a quick debrief. But a red band? That is high or even critical severity. It automatically triggers a log in the Safety Incident Management System, or SIMS, and demands a formal risk assessment and mandatory corrective action. No way around it. Now, what's genuinely fascinating about this is the strict, totally non-skippable 4-step sequence that kicks off the second a critical red band event happens. First step, the Digital Flight Data Recorder, or DFDR data, is shared right with the crew so they can provide comments. Step 2, the event gets raised on SIMS so the FDA cell can run a comprehensive risk assessment. Step 3 is all about reviewing the Action Taken report, the ATR, right alongside those crew comments. And finally, step 4, the report is either accepted and retained as satisfactory, or it gets kicked right back down the line for further action. You literally cannot bypass this workflow. And this specific quote brilliantly illustrates the completely non-punitive nature of the flight data monitoring program. The data is deliberately de-identified when it goes to other departments. Why? To ensure there's proper oversight without compromising the crew. The absolute main goal here is safety, not punishment. So unless specific counseling or corrective training is absolutely mandated, the crew's identity stays completely protected while the data gets shared with engineering or flight ops to make the whole fleet safer. Moving right along to Section 2, Engine Start and Taxi, General Flight Parameters. Let's head over to the cockpit now and carefully examine every single general exceedance parameter. I'm going to run through these limits with the quick, precise pacing of a pilot in the cockpit, just to make sure we don't miss a single metric from that manual. All right, starting with power. Max torque greater than 106% is a red exceedance. Max N1 over 102%? Red. Max N2 over 101%? Also red. Now keeping an eye on our temperatures. Maximum interstage turbine temperature, or ITT during start, is a red band if it tops 1020 RPM. Max ITT during takeoff over 880 degrees Celsius is red, and continuous ITT over 920 degrees Celsius is, you guessed it, red. Transitioning to the taxiway, going over 30 knots in a straight line or over 40 knots on a runway backtrack triggers an amber warning. Plus, a sudden temperature spike crossing 880 degrees Celsius while taxiing acts as a red limit. And lastly, if a stall warning is triggered at literally any point, that is an immediate red band event. Okay, I know that was a lot of numbers. So, to memorize these general limits effortlessly, just visualize the Q400's twin turboprops and keep your numbers clustered right around 100% baseline. When you think of the engine spools and power output, torque, N1 and N2, they all trigger red critical limits just a tiny fraction over 100. N2 breaks at 101, N1 at 102, and torque gives you a slightly larger buffer up to 106. Grouping these conceptually as the 100-plus club saves you from having to rote memorize seemingly random data points. It's a real game changer. Now, the absolutely crucial point here is this highly specific limit for maximum ITT during start, greater than 1020 RPM. It is a very specific zero-tolerance threshold. When you press that start button and watch those engine parameters spool up, the number 1020 should be glowing right in your mind's eye. Cross that line, and you are automatically dumped into a SIMS report and formal corrective action. Up next is Section 3, Rolling Down the Runway, Takeoff Limitations. We are officially cleared for takeoff, so let's accelerate straight into our strict takeoff parameters. I really want you to notice how our pitch rates and rotation speeds escalate systematically from amber warnings straight into red critical limits as we rotate off the runway. First up, exceeding the aircraft-specific maximum takeoff weight, instant red. Moving into the pitch phase, as you pull back on that yoke, a pitch rate high averaging over 4 degrees per second triggers amber, and anything pushing over 4.5 is red. On the flip side, a sluggish pitch rate low under 1.8 degrees per second is also a red band. During rotations, speeds are just as strict. Rotating too fast at VR plus 15 knots gives you an amber warning, while pushing it to VR plus 20 is red. Rotating too early at less than VR minus 5 is also red. And finally, as those wheels actually leave the tarmac for the unstick phase, your speeds have massive safety implications. An unstick speed high of greater than V2 plus 25 knots or an unstick speed low of less than V2 minus 10 knots are both major red exceedances.
During this phase, we also have to strictly monitor our aircraft configuration. This means verifying exact flap positions and making absolutely sure autopilot engagement happens only above 1,000 feet. A high pitch attitude greater than 6.5 degrees is amber, and anything over 7 degrees goes red. Engaging that autopilot early, below 1,000 feet, is a red exceedance. Taking off with flaps set lower than 5 or higher than 15, red. And any configuration change, like messing with the flaps during the actual takeoff roll itself, is an immediate red. Finally, rejected takeoffs, or RTOs, are logged as critical events, and they're categorized strictly by speed. Below 80 knots is a low-speed RTO, and above 80 knots is a high-speed RTO. Again, let's use a mental trick here, grouping these speed limits conceptually, like linking rotation variables specifically to VR and unstick variables to V2, saves incredible brain power and makes recall so much easier. Whenever you think of rotation on the runway, your baseline is always VR. Your safe envelope is -5 to +15. When you think of unsticking from the runway, your new mental baseline shifts over to V2, with a safe envelope of -10 to +25. And for an aborted takeoff, the magic dividing line between a low-speed and high-speed RTO is always, exactly, 80 knots. And I love how this brilliantly isolates our strict tire speed limit, triggering a critical red band exceedance the literal moment you push past 182 knots. Look, the Bombardier Q400 is an incredibly powerful machine, but the pure physics of those spinning tires on the runway have absolute, non-negotiable limits. Keep that number 182 completely locked in your memory during your takeoff roll. All right, let's move into our final phase, Section 4, Wheels Up, Climb Performance Rules. Let's see how all of this builds into our rigid climb performance rules. From tight bank angles near the ground to specific gear retraction speeds, every single limit in this table guarantees a perfectly safe ascent profile. Let's go through it. Excessive bank below 400 feet of greater than 8 degrees is a red limit. Once you cross above 400 feet, you get a little more room, but banking over 36 degrees is still red. Touching those flaps below 800 feet, that's an early configuration change and a definite red limit. Any initial climb height loss below 1,000 feet that triggers an EGPWS warning is an immediate red. Taking more than 15 seconds just to reach 1,000 feet is also a red exceedance. And finally, gear retraction speed. If you hit the switch going over 195 knots, you trigger an amber advisory. Push it over 200 knots, and it becomes a red critical event. Want to memorize those climb speeds effortlessly? Apply what I call the rule of twos. Across 3 completely different altitude bands up to 800 feet, the speed limit is exactly the same. The manual actually breaks the climb-out speed low limits into 3 distinct height zones: below 35 feet above ground level, between 35 and 400 feet, in between 400 and 800 feet. But guess what? You don't need to memorize 3 different numbers. The red exceedance threshold for a low climb-out speed in every single one of those zones is always less than V2 minus 2 knots. The rule of twos keeps it incredibly simple, right? Well, with our structured flight path complete, here is a final thought for you. Are you ready to apply these memory tricks and keep your next flight entirely out of the red band? Think about it. We've taken a massive, genuinely intimidating data set and turned it into a logical flow from the briefing room to engine start, down the runway, and right up into the climb. You now have the AR trick for severity, the 100+ club for engine parameters, the V-speed associations for takeoff, and the rule of twos for your climb out. Keep these clear mental visuals in your back pocket the next time you strap into the Q400. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, stay safe up there.